Hi, this is Dean Sprague from Melbourne Chefs, and today I'm speaking with Tammi Jonas, who's well known amongst the food system warriors as one of the chieftains and custodians of a very driven purpose of creating a more resilient and fair food system. Tammi runs Jonai Farms with her husband and kids just in the Hepburn Shire, and the traditional Jar Jar warring people. Welcome, Tammi.
Thanks, Dean. It's really good to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. So how's the winter been treating the farm?
Oh, I mean, it was such a mild winter, really, and a little bit worrying, not enough rain early on, but then came August and September, and the dams are full. I should actually, I mean, one of my favorite tricks is to show how beautiful it is.
Oh, it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig. I can see that.
Very
Absolutely.
green. Yeah. The garlic is growing. Everything's happy. Yeah.
So all things considered, 2020 has been an absolute lovely year for you.
I mean, mostly, obviously with COVID, there were impacts on us too, but happily not to sales because we're a CSA. So our household members still needed to be fed. And we just lost workshops, and I've missed teaching, and that was some lost income for sure. But on the other hand, I got weekends back, and I've started a PhD to fill them. So it's not so bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So your PhD is actually in rare breeds through University of Western Australia?
It is. That's right. Yeah. How's that I'm using sort of people's choice to raise rare breeds to understand how that gets them thinking more about biodiversity and agriculture, full stop. Yeah.
And you're also lecturing at Southern Cross, is that right?
Yeah.
So what are you actually doing with Southern Cross? What role do you play there?
Southern Cross have a new degree called, it's not the Regen Ag degree. People often think that's what I'm teaching, but I'm not. They have a graduate certificate in organic food and nutrition. And my subject is called Farm Gate to Plate, food for, I think it's like food for nutrition. I can't remember what comes after the, but I just remember Farm Gate to Plate, but it's, what it's actually been, because I'm writing the subject as well as teaching it. And it gave me an opportunity to do like a 6-week intensive, basically brain dump of Food Sovereignty 101. It's everything about how the different complexities of how food is produced and consumed in the societies that they're in, on the land that they're on, with the workers that do it. It's covering everything that I care about. It's been a really exciting opportunity actually to share.
So all those thoughts, feelings and experiences that you've had over the last decade or two or even more, you're actually bringing it all together so that others can use your experience as a starting block for their particular journey in food systems.
Exactly.
So Tammi, I mean, you've recently been doing some talks with the UN, the WHO, talking about food justice, social justice. How's that going? I understand the talks are ongoing.
Yeah, well, because the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance,
and most importantly, is the small-scale farmers' voice being heard? Is it being not acknowledged?
It depends on the meeting. So, as the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance, we're members of the International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty. So there's AFSA, and then there's IPC, and that's the global body. And as IPC, we're members of, we're observers to a number of UN processes. We're at all of the Food and Agriculture Organization meetings, plus their Committee on Agriculture, plus the Convention on Biological Diversity, the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, the Commission for Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. I can go on. And so these spaces are all really different, and I'm terribly interested in how these global governing bodies are or are not listening to peasants or small scale farmers and Indigenous peoples. And they're kind of these schizophrenic beasts, because on the one hand, as global governance bodies, their secretariat, which is made up of staff who are sort of content experts, as you would expect, they come with a lot of, solid research and recommendations to improve things like intensive livestock production, and to listen to small fisher folks' concerns in Thailand about the pollution of their water from pig sheds nearby. So they put this in all their papers, and you get really hopeful. And then you go to the meetings, but because the meetings are in fact the member states, they're the countries of the world who govern these secretariats. All of a sudden the vested interests are at the fore instead of the solid science and research and knowledge and care.
Yeah, that's right. And then things like economics, for example, come into play, the distribution of power and the ability to raise your voice in different directions, as opposed to
and it depends on which ministers come too. Like when you're in the ag meetings, it's all ag ministers, and they're the worst meetings. They're awful. The ag ministers from the countries with the largest industrial agriculture component are the most powerful, and they block consensus on things that could really help the world, and that's incredibly frustrating. The Convention on Biological Diversity is full of environment ministers, so everybody's like, yeah, we all want to stop climate change.
Yeah. And that play of politics on who has the most support and money, obviously, but
a lot of it is influenced by money. The guys the countries who are giving a lot of aid to small countries wield an inordinate amount of power.
Yep. And there's less governance in those particular countries as well, which need our support.
Yeah.
So one thing you do in amongst your many-hatted existence, Tammi, is you do support young farmers or new farmers to get onto the land. And that's quite an incredible thing. Now, obviously, most of us are city dwellers in Australia. Where can we apply those principles in our own homes?
Which principles? How to support young farmers? Or
Yeah. Well, both how to support, but also how to increase the amount of food that we grow for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think of food sovereignty and what people can do to promote food sovereignty, the first one is definitely grow more food. And even for people who are apartment dwellers, you can start with herbs, obviously, like you would know. And when we drove across America in a 1977 GMC motorhome in 2011 to see the country with our kids, I had a pot of herbs in the window of the motorhome, so like you can be
right,
full space and grow herbs. So I think that a lot of people's way into caring about food production is when they discover how much more delicious the food is. So herbs are super easy in there because compared with the dusty stuff you buy in the bottles, picking thyme from your own little thing is a great start. And the next thing you know, that leads to a pot of tomatoes. And again, that could happen in a windowsill. It doesn't have to be a larger garden. You won't be providing a lot of your own food that way, but you can do something. And then the next.
Exactly right. I mean, I actually live in an apartment myself, so I've only got 2 small balcony spaces, but I'm actually growing things like vanilla, coffee. Of course, there's rosemary and parsley and coriander and all the essentials, but I've got like half a dozen different varieties of tomatoes just in my little balcony space. And I'll tell you what, the joy that I feel from not only every day giving a little bit of water, a little bit of love and attention, but picking those things, whether it's some basil or some fresh tomatoes, there's nothing like it. And it really does close that loop of using that food in my cooking when I'm cooking at home. So I totally agree.
Exactly. And then if you've got that bit more space, you can do a bigger garden. You can have chickens. We had chickens when we were in the city for years. And I mean, that's how we learned to kill chickens, was when we had the first rooster, because you can't have a rooster in the suburbs.
No, can't have the rooster in the hen house.
Exactly. Well, you can here.
You can, absolutely. Yeah, a little bit of space. And I suppose like local council and all that kind of stuff, their rules. So if anyone's considering having chickens or any sort of livestock in an urban situation, you definitely do check with your local. Speaking of councils, I understand your husband Stuart is becoming a little bit more vocal in the local shire.
He is running for council, which is something I've always said I would never do.
And here you are.
No, I'm not.
Well, kind of by default, you've got your finger in the pie there.
A little bit, but I don't have to turn up to council meetings. So, it's,
Tell
really
tell them
exciting,
this.
actually.
Tell them this.
Yeah, it's exciting. He's
Mm,
he's concerned about the way our Shire has gone in the last year in particular in terms of listening to the community, and
mm,
he's seen me doing food sovereignty work for the last decade, and before that I was involved in various aspects of advocacy and
mm.
activism. I've always been that way. And he's like, you know what, I don't like how things are going here, and I know a bit about democracy, so I'm going to go and put my hat in the ring.
And besides, I've got a great co-founder right behind me here. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
really good team.
obviously, it's good to connect community, and all food starts with self, and then our families, community outwards. We can make an impact globally just by following a few simple principles. If anyone's considering getting into farming, or is had enough of the city life and really wants to get their hands dirty, what sort of advice would you offer a young potential farmer or an older?
I didn't have this sitting here for our talk.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
There you go. I would definitely recommend reading Farming Democracy because, as
who's
you
that
know,
one by? Is that
Farming
yours?
Democracy is, this is by AFSA. So it's got the story of 8 farmers, including us, and why we started farming, what we farm, how we farm it, how we process it, how we sell it. And it opens the books. One of the requirements to be in the book was that you had to be transparent about your finances, so that we could show people the real costs and benefits of farming in this way. So I think that's the manual that I tell everyone. That's why we wrote it, because we know that we're trying to support the growing movement. And we thought, well, there's a lot of information they need. Let's give them 8 really diverse farms and give them all the information we can. There's a grain farmer in it. There's market gardeners, there's CSAs and not, farmers markets, there's everything. So there's some who still work off farm, there's some who don't. There's some who've stopped farming and the reasons why, or why they changed their model a lot. So it's really good for those who are thinking of farming, because the stories are right there to find out if it's really for you. And then after that, I would say too, if you're in a position to, should definitely do an internship like the one that we offer. There are others around the country, plenty of people offering them now. And it's just invaluable experience to find out whether you really want to be a farmer. It's not for everyone. The romance of it is, I still believe the romance of it. Obviously I adore it, but it's also genuinely hard work. And for some people, being out and having to feed pigs in a rainstorm, it's a step too far. They don't want to do that. So go do an internship and find out.
Fantastic. It's just good to know that support is out there. This year has all been about understanding ourselves as well as our relation to the world, and having a resource like that is incredibly valuable. There's people who are considering moving to some acreage, getting away from those large centres.
There's actually, for people interested in market gardening, there's a brand new internship being offered next year or this season for the first time, called Stepping Stone Farm, I think it is. And that's up in South Coast, New South Wales, being run out near Moruya. And Joyce Wilkie, who was one of the pioneers of organics in Australia up outside of Canberra, she's the one taking the lead on teaching into that. So that's a very formalized and serious internship where you'll be running your own little market garden as part of it very early on.
So, fantastic. And I know even through my little balcony garden, you're forever trimming and clipping and all that kind of stuff. And I just can't, if I'm not using it, I just can't just throw it away or throw it into compost. I start to pop them into little pots and upcycle some old plastics and all that kind of stuff. So that's the thing
that makes everybody a food sovereignty warrior, is growing some food. Because, if there's a blemish on the apple, if it's a supermarket apple, people might go ahead and throw that out. But if it's an apple you picked off a tree that you watched grow and ripen and you waited for, when it's got a blemish, you either turn it into applesauce, or you cut the blemish out, put that in the compost, or give it to the chooks and you use the rest, eat it fresh, or whatever you're going to do, but you would never throw it out.
No, absolutely. And it's one of those things I've come out and watered every single day. I've watched it from a little blossom all the way through to a little fruit and beyond. And now is it time to pick it just yet? And, you know, that very first taste of something that you've grown yourself,
Yeah,
you
it changes
easily converted.
Well, actually, you caught me. The reason I was here dead on time, not a few minutes early, because I had to water my seedlings in my little mini greenhouse before I sat down.
Perfect. Most important. Most important. Yeah. I suppose one of the things that you've been talking about for a long time now is intensive agriculture. You mentioned a little bit earlier. I guess this year more than ever, we've raised our awareness of the effects of intensive agriculture and what those big food producers, those multinational food producers, influence on our daily diet is. What are your thoughts on that, Tammi?
Yeah, I mean, right now its influence on your whole life is that you're locked up in an apartment in Melbourne with no end in sight. So if that's not a severe enough impact on people's lives, then I don't know what is for the wake up call. Yeah, I had my awakening back in 91 when I read Peter Singer's Animal Liberation and realized how we treat animals in intensive livestock production systems and learning of the practices, the standard practices that happen in sheds and feedlots. I became a vegetarian overnight. And so 30 years later, it's 30 years that I've been like worrying at and being active around these problems. I'm obviously no longer a vegetarian because I'm a pig farmer. And
yes.
They never trust a pig farming butcher.
And I've seen photos of you covered in blood, guts, and gore, and smiling from ear to ear with a carcass that you've. You know, for most city dwellers, there is such a detachment. Is that a word? Non-attachment to the food that we consume. You know, some of the stats that I've been reading, even in regional centres, that 50% of people will go to the supermarket or a shopping centre to get their weekly shopping. The stats are showing that we're popping in 2 or 3 times per week now. But yeah, the growing of your own food. But how can we make that shift in our mind from sitting in a cafe on a Sunday morning, having brunch with a bacon and egg sandwich, to raising an animal and calling it by name as you travel along, but also very much aware of where its journey comes to an end?
Yeah, I mean, it's on that naming thing. People say to me, how can you eat an animal you knew? And my stock response is, how can you eat one you didn't? So I'm usually vegetarian when I leave the property because I don't know how the animals were raised. And even friends' animals, I don't know. I don't really like eating animals that I didn't raise more. So I think the disconnect is because you're shopping at a grocery store, you know, everything's coming in plastic wrapping and you have no connection to where it's grown. And the people who become members of our CSA, they're in the city, they can't grow pigs, obviously, but they want to eat bacon. So when they come up here and they meet the animals on the paddocks and they see that life and they've seen the images, because I share it with the members, of the sheds and the cages and those things, and they know the difference. And they can't go back. You know, I've had I've also even had interns say to me who arrived thinking they could just continue eating a bit of, you know, intensive meat on the side. Not that often, but I really like chicken, or I really like this. And they, after time with us, they say, you ruined me. I can't.
Good.
And one of them, actually, a Chinese Australian intern that we had, he was brilliant, Richie. And he said, after about 3 weeks after he left here, he rang me up. He said, Tammi, you've ruined yum cha. And I'm like, oh, Richie, good. And he goes, no, it's your heritage, Tammi. Like, you've destroyed my ability to go out with my cousins and eat our family history. And I'm like, well, I'm sad about that. But like, I mean, it's good for the pigs, right? And he said, well, the thing is, I just never realized how shit the meat was. You know, he's like, I was prepared to continue being unethical because you know what I'm like, Tam.
It's yum cha. It's yum cha.
Yeah, but he's like, but it tastes bad. It's not good. And I think that's, again, people, if they were more connected and they had the opportunity to taste the difference, they can make the change. You know, my daughter actually rang me yesterday. She's trying to learn latte art because of wanting to get a job in a local cafe. So she's been practicing each morning on her coffee, because she's got a coffee machine. And her housemate said to her, "You'll learn faster if you just buy some shit coffee and shit milk and practice and throw it away."
Practice and practice. Yep.
And my daughter said to her, "What? I'm not buying shit milk. Do you know what they do to the calves in that industry? And I'm not buying shit coffee. Do you know what? We're only buying fair trade, because do you know how people are treated who we buy the coffee from in the other systems?" She's like, and I had the proud mama moment.
My work here is done.
She knows she's doing it right. And yeah, I mean, when you think a lot about it and you have connection to food production, your care factor about that just keeps going up and up.
And we ought to. I mean, we understand that whatever we put into our bodies is going to affect our health, our mood, our relationship to others, our relationship to ourselves. And
well, that's another thing we've seen, because the interns come for 3 months at a time, and quite a few of them we've seen arrive with, well, we've had some arrive with like irritable bowel syndrome, or I think somebody might, is that an annoying sound?
Nope.
No? Okay, good. They like irritable bowel, they've come with skin issues, and by the second month with us, their skin is clear, they're glowing, they can eat, they don't have to do anything for the issues with their guts, like they're healed because they only eat whole food here. And they're really grateful, because they thought they had pretty good diets, but they actually still had a fair bit of processed stuff without really thinking about it. And in our world, that's not here.
And to see that sort of result in itself is something that's worthwhile pursuing. It's worthwhile talking about that particular result. Tell me about the your understanding of the Indigenous people when in relation to food, Tammi. I've got that romantic view of historically Indigenous people would offer some sort of prayer or incantation of gratitude for the abundance, certainly for the impact that creature or that substance has played in the world scope. Do you have any thoughts on our traditional way of keeping food?
Yeah, I'm actually, it's an area that I'm working increasingly to understand better and better. And I mean, as you would know, Indigenous cultures all around the world, not just in Australia, have typically a very different relationship to the earth in its totality. And you have like the Andean cultures talking about Pachamama, which means Mother Earth. That's where we get these phrases from. And when you think of the earth as your mother, like in those particular cosmologies, you would no sooner cut your mother's arm off than you would cut a tree from the ground without there being a reason for it to be utilized in the system in a kind of, really nurturing way for the whole system. And so First Nations Australians have they don't refer to her as Mother Earth, but have the dreamings and the song lines that help them understand they're only one part of the ecosystem. This is something that, again, is traditional for Indigenous cultures all around the world, rather than the human exceptional kind of viewpoint where we're somehow separate from nature. These cultures believe that they're part of nature and they're part of the system. So we don't have any greater right than any other species in the system to take more than our share. And one of the things the First Nations Australians have is that you have to leave you have to leave everything as you found it. So your mark on the world should not be that you've left skyscrapers and climate change. It should be that when the next generation passes through, it's just that the trees are that much more mature, but they're still just as healthy. And the balance of species in the ecosystem remains. And I think those are something that we really, really need to be learning from actively, not paying lip service to. And the longer I've been on this land, the more I feel like as a young person, I was just a tree hugging hippie anyway. So I kind of always had these ideas that we were, I would say those things. We're all part of the earth. Yes, I've always felt that. But it's not until spending this last decade on the land that I think I've started to understand it into my bones, like that the land and I now have a relationship. And I think this is really hard for Australia because we're the most urbanized country in the world. And it's much more difficult to get that as a really visceral experience of understanding ourselves as just part of an ecosystem when we're in such human-made ecosystems of,
Mm.
cities. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I'm really interested in thinking about. How can people in the city develop these connections to country
Mm.
in meaningful ways? Because then we will be more worried about how we hurt it. Like we
Mm.
don't make a cut into our land without thinking very seriously about whether there's another way to achieve
Mm.
the same sort of thing. There's no
Yeah.
tillage here. I mean, even my veggie garden, everything is always layered. I don't dig because I know that underneath the top of that soil, it's like underneath the sea. There's so much life under there.
Mm.
I should disturb it as little as possible.
Yeah. And that's right. I mean, the further we look down into um, the nutrient of soil, and that's also a major factor. We realise that it's teeming with life. The sign of
It
a
is.
healthy ecosystem is the fact that there is microscopic life, and yes, we can see those bugs and worms and all those that are composting and working for us even without our awareness. For me, it's I think the acknowledgement, even when I've got a food article, just to say, hey, this was and is a living being, and just to say, hey, thanks for providing for me. I mean, it's a traditional sort of prayer, I guess, through many cultures.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have
But yeah,
our tradition at our table. We sit down to 3 meals a day together, and the whole team, whoever is on the farm on any given day, visitors, workers, family, and interns. And so everyone serves each other and ourselves. And then before we begin, we believe in the Japanese version of itadakimasu, uh,
yes.
which is an expression of gratitude for the plants, the animals, the sun, the farmers, the cooks, and those you're enjoying the meal with. It's everything.
And
And
then beyond after we've finished eating.
that's right. That's right. So it's the shortest way we could think everything in what, in one word.
Yes. Well, it's I remember. I mean, I had a small farm many years ago, and I was growing strawberries and culinary herbs and all that kind of fun stuff. But that picking off that strawberry in the sun, yes, it makes the cheeks absolutely glow, and you appreciate how much juice and flavour and sugar is in those little beasties. But it was always using that same Japanese principle. The energy of the food is at its height when it's freshly picked and consumed. And that's one of the guiding principles behind that as well. So that's incredible. And you're totally right. We can plant a seed, we can grow a seedling and a tree and pick its fruits and then use its wood in other uses. And
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
circle of life, circle
And
of life.
that's something else. I think it's not just food systems, but it's everything. But for me,
Mm.
particular passion is food systems. But the
Mm-hmm.
circular economies are something that we have to get way better at. That
Mm.
whole there's no planet B stuff. We need to close all our loops. And
Yeah.
so at Joe and I, we talk about paddock to paddock, not paddock to plate.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that what we've taken from here gets also then recycled back here. In really healthy ways. So the
Mm-hmm.
bones from after processing pigs here, leftover bones are then pyrolyzed in a retort stirret built from entirely recycled materials, and that makes them into bone char, and that bone char is then activated in a biofertilizer that we make from waste whey and molasses, and then that is used to grow a crop of garlic. So
Yes,
we're not
incredible.
buying in compost for that. We're creating all that fertility
Yes.
with our resources here, the patrimony of the farm.
Yeah, wow. I mean, even not taking it to the nth degree which you have there, but we can certainly understand that if we've got bones or leftover scraps from our vegetables, that we can do more with it. And certainly just throwing it into landfill hasn't been working. That's definitely one
No, I think
practice we need to.
hasn't Melbourne actually just recently got municipal composting facilities?
Yes, yes. There's also a little bit of politics involved there as well. What happens with our waste? But yeah, there's certainly been some changes, which is a good thing. Obviously, not enough, not soon enough.
Right.
More, definitely. But those days, hopefully, these days of consuming something and throwing it out are beginning to be left behind. Tammi, I guess to close up, I know life on the farm is quite hectic. Understand that. Obviously, this year you're not taking any interns. Are you making
Oh
plans
no,
for
we've had
2020?
interns still. Yeah, we've got young Adam with us at the moment, who's done 2 seasons of market gardening actually down the Mornington Peninsula, and he's only 23, but he's really keen to be a farmer. Like, he's really keen to be a farmer, and
Fantastic.
he's made for it. He arrived with seeds. He knew he was going to be itinerant for the next 6 months of his life. He didn't know where he'd be for a summer veg, but he just arrived with seeds to make sure he could grow some vegetables. Like,
yeah, fantastic.
yeah,
I love
knows.
I love the way Adam thinks. Absolutely, he's definitely one of the tribe. Well, I guess moving forward, where would you like to see your farm and your influence over the next 5 and 10 years?
I mean, I would like to see some of the more progressive work happening at the UN level actually impact on Australian ag policy. It's a very slow process, and AFSA is doing everything we can to influence some of the other key stakeholders, like the NFF. They're working on a biodiversity certification scheme, and right now it's very much this kind of nature-based solutions, which is a false solution sort of space, where you just pay people to plant trees while they keep polluting. And we're trying to influence their work to get it, progressive, to get it be more progressive, because they've actually started talking about regenerative agriculture. So I think there's hope of pushing them along a little bit faster. So I feel like if we can influence more of the other powerful stakeholders in Australia, as well as the influence we do have in the UN spaces, that we might eventually be able to influence the Australian government. We already have a really good in with the state government, and we've achieved some good reforms in Victoria. I'd certainly like to see me and others influencing this emerging movement of agroecological farmers to think and be in more ways more like the First Nations peoples. Consider ourselves just one small part of the ecosystem and play our role responsibly.
And custodians as opposed to owners.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tammi, thank you so much for your time. Don't stop doing what you're doing. We'll be adding links to your website and social media channels and all that kind of stuff. But I guess just to close out, for people who are considering growing their own food or becoming part of a food movement, or even working in their community with food, what advice would you have for them? What encouragement would you have for them?
Well, first is join AFSA, obviously, because we can help connect people in wherever they are to the others who are interested in the same things. And, find whether there's a local community garden you could work in, or go check out one of your local organic co-ops. There's always groups of people coming together around these things. Find your tribe of people who care about this stuff by going to where they are. And that is, that's mostly where hippies hang out. But pretty soon the whole world's going to be hippies, because it turns out
I hope so.
Right.
I hope so.
We need to be better to the land than we have been. So
yeah,
we're all headed down that path now.
And if it doesn't exist, start it. Absolutely. There's so much resource out there for you. And of course, the AFSA is a great starting point for that.
I would also say, Dean, people should be really be kind to yourselves if you're sort of at the beginning of a journey like this. If you go and you buy Milo still, but you are growing a bunch of your own food, be glad that you're now growing a bunch of your own food, and then find out a little bit more about Milo and whether that's a company you want to support. So don't beat yourself up for the compromises and the poor decisions. Just learn from them and keep trying to do better every time.
Yeah, exactly right. And of course, the more you learn, the more you learn.
Exactly.
Tammi, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
And,
thank you for having me.
And best luck for the upcoming elections for Stuart. And
yes.
Just don't stop doing what you're doing, Tammi. We need you.
I couldn't if I tried, Dean. I'm
good. Well, sending all my energy and power to you, just to being supporting you and the work that you do.
Thanks so much. It's easier to do also now that there's no travel. I have to do it all from home. I get to see on the spot. It's really great.
Yes, fantastic. You take care of yourself, Tammi.
You too, Dean. Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.